So congratulations, you made it to the point where we are going to create our very first Facebook ad and drive traffic to our store. Now I'm going to use my heart-shaped dog pendant as an example throughout this lecture. I'm going to show you how to set up the ad on Facebook and then how to actually bring targeted customers to your site so that they will buy it. So the first thing I want to do is head over to the Ads Manager. Now, having set up your Facebook Ads account, you should have a button somewhere that says Create Advert. And when you click on that, you should be looking at a page something like this. Now, I say something like this because Facebook is always a bit of a moving target. And whenever I do Facebook teaching of any kind, I always have to say that by the time you look at it, it might look slightly different. But that said, this page has actually remained much the same for quite some time now. Now, it starts off by saying, what's your marketing objective? And what we have here are three areas: awareness, consideration, and conversion. Now, awareness is all about building up your brand. Consideration is basically driving traffic to your brand. And conversion is actually measuring how people do things once they are on your site. And it's conversion that we're going to focus on. Now, a conversion could be any event on your website. It could be simply visiting a page. It could be putting something into the cart, or ultimately it could be buying something from your site. So we are going to do conversion ads. So the first thing we need to do is to click on conversions. Now, if I scroll down a bit, you'll see this: conversions. Get people to take valuable actions on your website, all right? Such as adding payment info or making a purchase, okay, just as I was saying. And just here for completeness, it says use the Facebook pixel to track and measure conversions, all right? So that ties in very nicely with the last lecture where we set up the Facebook pixel and I explained that it is doing exactly that. It's tracking and measuring conversions and bringing more and more targeted people to your site. But remember, I also said you don't need to worry about it. It's working its magic in the background. Now, for the moment, all we want to do is just create a campaign name. So I'm going to call mine the Heart-Shaped Dog Pendant Campaign 1. Now, that's a good name for a campaign because it says exactly what I'm advertising, the Heart-Shaped Dog Pendant, and I put a 1 on the end just in case I want to do other campaigns later on. So having chosen your campaign name, and I suggest you use exactly that method, click on Set Up Ad Account. Now, this is something you'll only need to go through once when you're very first getting started. This page isn't going to keep on popping up all of the time. But it basically just asks me to set up my account. So it's looking for my account country, the currency I want to report in, and my time zone. So I'm just going to leave it that by default. Look at yours, make sure you're happy, and then simply click on Continue. So what you get now is this fairly complex form, which is essentially all about defining the audience that you want to target to bring to your site to buy your product, okay? Now, things can get very involved with Facebook. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the essential items that you need to get started as quickly as possible. Now, the first thing I want to do is come up with an ad set name. So very unoriginal, but I'm just going to call this ad set 1, okay, just purely for teaching purposes. You'll see later on that we're going to create an ad set 2, okay, but for the moment just accept that we're going to call it ad set 1. Now, the next thing is we come down to this conversion section. Now, if I click in here, you get to see various conversion events. You remember just now I said that a conversion could be something that happens on your website. So let's have a look at some of these. We've got view content, which basically means somebody viewing one of our pages. We've got an add to cart. We've got an initiate the checkout process. Somebody doing a search, adding to a wish list. We don't actually have that on my site at the moment. Adding their payment info, making a purchase, etc. These are all conversion events. And you might notice that some of them have got a green dot next to them, like this view content, and some of them have got a red dot next to them, like this purchase one here. And a green dot basically means that that event has already fired on our website somewhere, because this is the magic of the pixel. You remember when we were setting up the pixel, I said, you know, if you don't see it basically being active, to go to your site and just click around, which is exactly what I did. And so I basically fired these events. I viewed a content. You remember I added something to the cart, so these are green. But I never bought anything off my website. So for the moment, the purchase one is red. Now, this is the very, very clever bit, the bit you don't have to worry about, but this really is the magic of Facebook ads. Because if I select, for example, purchase, What it means is that when somebody buys something from my site, Facebook can see the profile, that type of person. It can start to build up an idea of the sorts of people that are going to buy from my business. And then what it will do is it will send more people like that to my site. It starts to learn from itself. It's very, very clever. And of course, it's in Facebook's interest, clearly, to send as much traffic as possible to your site to buy, because if that happens, you're obviously going to be spending more money with Facebook ads. So that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to take the purchase event, and then I'm going to scroll down, and we're going to talk about the all-important audience. Now we're going to create a new audience, and I want you to scroll straight down to this location. Now by default, it'll have the country where you are currently residing, but what you want to do in here is put in United States. We're going to target people in the US to start with. Now obviously if you're already in the US, you don't need to do this, but just select United States as a country. Right, now as we scroll down here, we now get to play around with age, gender and language. Now at this point we're talking about your ideal customer. You remember way back we were talking about the customer avatar, the type of person who's going to buy your products. Well, hopefully you've given that some serious thought, and if you haven't done, you need to do that before you fill in this next bit. But basically that's where we're starting to define that now for our campaign. So for example, with dog jewelry, I know from experience that mostly it's women 35 and above. So I would put in here for the age 35, select women, and then for here I basically want people who are English speaking. At the end of the day, my site is in English, so it doesn't make much sense to send people who aren't English speaking. Now at this point, if you look over here, you get this kind of barometer thing here, and we get a potential reach of 66 million people. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that's incredible. You know, all I got to do is get 1% of those and I've made a fortune. But it doesn't work like that. 66 million people is way, way, way too broad for Facebook to start with, to start to really understand your customer. What you need to do in the beginning is to give Facebook a helping hand, is to try and define as closely as possible the targeted audience yourself, and then from there, they will help you. But if you just give them literally too much, too broad an audience in the beginning, it's very difficult for them to figure out exactly who is the best person for you. So with that in mind, we now come down to this detailed targeting section. So this is where we're going to start to narrow down our audience. Now the detailed targeting relates very strongly to the buyers and communities lecture. And if you don't remember that, because it was some time ago, I really recommend you go back and watch that now. So basically what we've been talking about here with age, gender and languages is more about the broader sense of the customer avatar. And now we're talking about detailed targeting, which is more related to the buyers and the communities. Now, if you remember, the buyers and communities lecture was all about trying to find the people who are actually going to buy our products. And I mentioned in that lecture Labradors and a product called BarkBox. And I'm going to use that now to show exactly how my thought processes work. So I'm going to type into this first box Labrador. And it suggests a bunch of options, but I'm looking for the one most relevant. So I'm going to take Labrador Retriever, which has 9.7 million people who effectively liked that particular page. So I'm going to take that, and now what I want to do is narrow the audience further. So if you have watched that lecture on buyers and communities, you'll remember that Labrador Retriever is fine. People will like Labradors, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they own one. But by narrowing the audience and bringing in, let's say, proof that people do own a Labrador, then I am far more likely to hit the people who really own a Labrador and are therefore more likely to buy my product. So I'm going to click on Narrow Audience. And here, in accordance with my lecture, I'm going to type in BarkBox. Now, just to remind you, BarkBox is a company that will deliver periodically a bunch of goodies for your dog. So if you didn't own a dog, that would kind of be a weird thing to sign up for. So BarkBox for me is pretty good proof. Now, the last thing I want you to do is just to uncheck this box here, this expand interest box. Now at this point you will notice that the potential reach has fallen from several million to 800,000, and that is exactly the area we want to be in. In fact, and you might want to write this down, your target audience when you are testing, because we are testing at the moment, we are basically seeing if we can sell this product to this targeted audience. Your potential reach for your targeted audience at this stage should be between 500,000 and 1 million-ish. All right, write that down, that's key. So your objective here is therefore to get a targeted audience within that band. Now, less than 500,000, really Facebook doesn't have enough to work with, and more than that, we are giving it too much to do. So that is the sweet spot. Now, before we move on to the form, what I want to say is that for this business model, this is where you are going to spend the majority of your time. Defining your target customer is the key to success of this. If you think about it, up to this point, it's been fairly formulaic. I can teach you how to build a Shopify store. We can go through all that. We can make things look beautiful. We can choose products. We can get them from AliExpress. You are basically following a formula. But at this stage, you really need to think about your customer avatar and how you're going to apply it to your Facebook targeting at this stage. It is super, super important. Or to put it another way, if you don't, you're going to find it very difficult to build out a really great business. So I trust that point is well and truly driven home. So let's carry on down through the form. Now, the next thing we want to focus on are the placements. Now, by default, Facebook says it wants to do automatic placements for you. But actually, you don't want to do that. You want to click on Edit Placements, and it pulls up all kinds of options. So to get this onto one screen here. Now, first of all, we have the devices, mobile or desktop or both. Then we have all these various platforms, Facebook, Instagram, which of course is owned by Facebook, the audience network, and Messenger. Now, I don't want to get into a lot of detail about these different platforms, but what I am going to say, first of all, is that what I do these days is I focus on mobile. The web goes more and more mobile every day. I'm sure you've seen the headlines. And really, targeting mobile is where you want to be. It's the best place to spend your money. So I always check on mobile, and you might see a small reduction in your potential reach, but there you go. That proves really to me how important mobile is. We've lost 10,000 people. That's all from our original estimate. Now, for the platforms, Facebook, of course, is absolutely fine. Instagram, if you like. But what I don't do is the audience network. I find that it does not bring me any decent results. The audience network is effectively advertising off Facebook, off Instagram with their so-called partners. It will bring you traffic, I can guarantee that, but it will bring you poor quality traffic. It won't bring you people who will buy your product. So effectively, you are wasting your money. And for me, I also put Messenger in that same bracket. I don't feel that it really brings me any benefit. So I leave with Facebook and Instagram, and then that basically is it. So I can then continue down to the all-important subject of the budget and schedule. Now, the budget is set at $20. Now, that is way too high. We are testing at this phase. We are testing, as I said before, to see if we can basically sell this product to this audience. And we therefore do not want to be spending $20 a day. So what I suggest you do, my recommendation is always to spend between $3 and $5 a day. That's all you need to do in this test phase. You will see that once you find a winning product, and we'll talk about this in a bit later on, once you find that winning product, we will scale up. We will scale up our budget, and I'll teach you how to do that. And you'll increase that potential reach audience. You will therefore increase your exposure, and you will sell more and more. But in the beginning, that is not our goal. We want to keep a tight budget. So I'm simply going to put in 3 here. And then for the rest of this, we really don't need to worry about it. All of this stuff we can simply accept. So there we go. That brings us to the end of the form. So you've carefully defined your audience and you've set up a budget. Now in the next part, in part 2, coming up any second, we are going to look at setting up the advert itself. So I want you to click on that continue button and I will see you in a second.